Hi, I'm Bijan from Product Management Exercises, and today we're going to do a mock interview together with Nir. Nir is one of the users of our website. He actually used our website to prepare for his interview while being in school, studying, and he recently landed a job as an associate product manager at Atlassian. So with that background, I'll let you, Nir, introduce yourself, and then we can start the product manager interview question.
Yeah, thanks, Bijan, and hi, everyone. So my name is Nia. I'm currently finishing my double degree in engineering and commerce at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. And like Bijan said, I've recently had an interview with Atlassian and got my dream job, I guess you can say, as a product manager or associate product manager at Atlassian, which is very exciting. And yeah, very much looking forward to today. It'll be very, very fun. Hopefully it'll be fun for me, and maybe someone can actually benefit from looking at this and getting some help for their prep. So, yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do the mock interview. The question that we're going to practice together is an execution question. And the question is, how would you evaluate the success of reactions in Facebook?
Okay. Awesome. Okay, well, normally what I like to do, because it is a pretty not too wide of a question. Some questions I get can be a very, very big scope. So this is pretty, helps narrow it down. Mind if I ask you a few questions before we start?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So this one actually is pretty straightforward. I guess I'd like to know if you have any specific directions for success, if you have any idea for success, or do you want me to define it myself, which I'm happy to do.
You can define it yourself, yeah.
Sure. And when we look at Facebook, when we're talking about the reactions, are you looking at a specific avenue of Facebook, for example, in a scope of the marketplace posts or business posts or private posts, or do you want me to kind of go, because I'm happy to go in any direction I see fit, but if there's anything you want me to go in, just let me know. You want me in a specific direction?
I think it's more generic about basically reactions to the posts that you see in the newsfeed, yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. In that case, I'll take just a couple of minutes just to scribble some things down, and I'll be right back with you.
Sounds good.
I normally don't really talk to this part, but I will kind of talk through my thoughts as I'm writing notes down.
That's totally fine. Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, I learned that it's probably not always a good idea to just jump. Actually, it's never a good idea to just jump in into the answering stage. I've actually I don't know if that was a smart idea. I guess it paid off at the end, but during my interview, I've made a joke when one of the questions my interviewer asked me, I think it was a question whether a company should do something. And I just straight away just looked at the camera and said yes. And that was my answer. I've obviously continued later on just actually explaining my whole thought process and going through with it. But the point is never just jumping to an answer.
That's a very good tip. And yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So I'm just taking some notes, building my structure for the question, how I'm going to approach it. Okay. Yeah. I think I'm ready. So let's go. So I'd like to start with an overview, just letting you know kind of the thought process and the things I'm going to go through to come to a conclusion on how to evaluate the success of reactions on Facebook. So firstly, I'd like to discuss Facebook as a whole, just a short discussion of what Facebook is, what it does, Facebook's goals, because I think it's really important to understand before we even talk about measuring success for Facebook. We need to understand what is Facebook and what it's trying to achieve. Then I'll go into discussing reactions, so what they are, who uses them, and why would people use them at all. Then I'd like to touch on how reactions actually add value to users, the people who use them and the people they're being used on. So the poster and the postee, I guess. And then we'll talk a bit about looking into all those elements. So who is Facebook, what are reactions, and what value do they add? Then we can look at the fourth element, which is how we'd evaluate. So finding some matrix, for example, to evaluate the success of this reaction feature in Facebook. Well, actually, before I jump in, I'd like to see if you're happy with the structure, if you have any questions, if it's all clear so far.
No, that makes sense. Let's get started.
Sure, easy. So with Facebook's purpose, so Facebook is a social media platform, obviously, that mainly focuses on letting users share parts of their life using images, text, or video content. It has multiple other elements. So it has the Facebook Messenger and the Marketplace, and it has different kinds of groups. But today, for the purpose of the reactions discussion, like I mentioned before, I'd really like to focus just on the basic Facebook, let's say, feed, wall, and the basic average private user, and maybe business users as well, for the sake of the reaction discussion. So going from there, for Facebook, I'd say one of its main goals would be to create the best social platform experience for users and allow users to express themselves in the best and I'd say in a modern day most efficient way. We all know there is a lot of noise out there nowadays, a lot of platforms, a lot of websites. People spend, the time is being divided more and more between different platforms. So I think Facebook is really trying to make sure you're able to be very efficient with your time, like I mentioned, and being able to engage in the best way possible. So I'd say that would probably be one of Facebook's big goals. Obviously, another goal I'd say is increasing user engagement, which kind of relates to the first point. And that's really to focus on the business side of Facebook, right? Facebook is trying to attract more eyeballs so they can sell engagement to businesses for the purpose of ads. So probably increasing engagement is another big important goal for Facebook overall. So now that we have a basic overview of Facebook, at least in the context of this question, I think it's good to move on to reactions and what they are and who uses them. So reactions are, if whoever's using Facebook or has encountered reactions before in Facebook, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about. They are small emoji style images that you get to react with to an image instead of the basic like. So normally just put a thumbs up. They actually allow you to replace a thumbs up with a small range of other emojis. So you have an angry emoji, you have a laughing emoji, laughing, crying, and you have all kinds of other emojis to just add a bit more emotion to the picture rather than just a like or nothing. And I think they really allow users to express more complex emotions without spending the time to write a comment, right? So they just allow you, give you a faster way of expressing yourself. So when would you use it and why would people use them? If you don't have the time to comment, for example, but you want to express your emotions in a way that is more than just I like this. You want to say, oh, I'm actually angry about this, but you don't want to write a whole angry comment, or you're very happy about it, or you want to celebrate something. So it really allows you to express yourself in a very quick and efficient way. It can also be that you just don't care enough, where in the past there would be a line between I care more than just a like, but I don't care enough to leave a comment kind of thing. This gives you a bit of a middle ground where it still gives you just another range of engagement that you didn't have beforehand. So I'd say those, looking at the reaction feature overall, is probably aimed at your, again, just private person who is looking at the feed and is looking to interact with it, interact with the wall. And I would say that's probably the main kind of use scenario, which is the majority of Facebook users. And yeah, I think that gives you a good overview of what reactions are, those little emojis, and who I would say would probably use them the most and why they would use them. Would that be fair enough, Bijan?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we can continue.
Awesome. Perfect. Now I'd go into the next step so we'll talk about is how reactions add value to users. And we'll talk about how they add value to people who use them and those that are being used on. If you don't mind, I'll just take another minute to just think about it, and I'll get back to you in a sec.
Sure.
All right.
All
so,
right.
Yes, we are now at how reactions add value, just exploring a bit. We talked about Facebook as a business. We talked about what are reactions and get an idea for who uses them. And now we'll talk a bit about how reactions add value to the people who use them and the people who receive the reaction potentially. So I'd like to break down, like I mentioned, the value prop of reactions to users and the people who it's being used on. So we have two kind of camps. So as far as users, I'd say one of the benefits of the feature is that it reduces mental fatigue, right? So you don't have to put as much effort into expressing your feelings like you would have before. Again, with a comment, something we touched on before, you're able to use less mental ability and express yourself in a very similar way that you would like to, and that means you're just able to engage with more content, or at least you're less fatigued when you do, which I'd say is one value prop. Another one that is a kind of natural progression of that is it saves you time as a user. So again, you're able to engage in less time. So you have to think less, and it's a bit easier to do, but also it is quicker. So, and both of those go into giving you the ability to engage with more content as a side effect of saving you time and saving you effort. And I'd say the last benefit I see is it gives you potentially, or gives users more satisfaction with just giving them a bit more freedom. So freedom of expression, at least. Where in the past, again, you were a bit locked to having to like or dislike a post, where you might feel that the range of emotions you would like to express yourself in a different way. A reaction really gives you a bit more of a choice, where sometimes too much choice can be bad, but I feel like in the reaction feature case, you have only a few basic emojis. You don't have a huge range to choose from. So it's not, it's not overwhelming. And fairly basic, easy reactions to relate to. So angry, happy, laughing, stuff like that. So I feel like it definitely, for me at least, it does make me feel like I have a bit more options when I engage with content on my wall or my posts. So that's really good. As far as the people who receive the reactions, I'd say, and here I'd focus mainly on businesses and influencers, although it can be relevant to private people too. It gives you some better feedback to your posts, where in the past you would either get likes and comments, where you have to really read the comments to get an idea for the how your post is being accepted by your community. Now you can actually have a much quicker indicators, much easier indicators to read on how your post is being accepted. If you have lots of angry emojis, okay, I probably screwed up here, right? Let me look into this, what happened. If you have overwhelming reactions, which are not thumbs up, but a lot of people give you like love hearts or something, oh, this hit home really well, probably. People, went out of the way to like it, and, I'm just getting a bit more feedback quicker. Mm. So I would say that would be a good benefit, just easier, another indicator for how posts do it that is much easier to interpret than reading comments and trying to make sense of that. And obviously the natural one, which comes up from the user side, is more people can engage with the content now, where in the past someone didn't want to leave a comment, but they didn't just want to like. This time they have an extra option, which is quick and easy, and it opens the possibility of more people engaging with your content as a business, as a creator, or even just average user, I would say, which is a great pro. Because that's what everyone wants on Facebook or social media is engagement, so very important. Quite ingenious, actually, this whole feature. But anyway, now we'll move to the last part. So we talked about Facebook, we talked about reactions, we talked about the value they add. So I think we now have enough information to really decide on some metrics to assess the feature and see if it's performing as well as we want to. Like what does it mean to perform well for reactions? So give me just 2 more seconds. I'm gonna jot some things down and I'll be right back with you.
Sounds good.
All right, got something for us.
Good.
Yep. So I feel like once we discuss everything else, getting to actually answering the question gets much easier because we have a much better idea of what's going on, what we are looking at, and it's actually pretty straightforward. After talking about the value prop, right? All we want to do is make sure that this feature delivers on what we consider is the value of the feature. So one metric I would use to evaluate the success of the Facebook reactions would be at looking at average posts engaged with per user as one engagement, for example. Basically saying if before, like measuring the engagement rate per user before, so let's say one user in a day, on average, engage with 20 posts, for example. Would they now, after the implementation of reaction, engage with 30 posts, for example? You would see, a 50% increase in reaction, in overall engagement per user. So you can look at, you have a sample size, you can do a beta test and look at some users and have a look at their engagement beforehand and after reactions, for example. You can look at the overall platform through a soft launch. There's all kinds of different things you can do, but the overall stat I would look at is the rate of reaction, of engagement per specific user. So how many posts they engage with per day, for example. Another metric I think will be really cool is to look at the percent of reactions used out of overall engagement. So for example, let's say per 1,000 posts, for example. So let's say look at 1,000 posts or n sample size of posts, and you look at the overall engagement. So likes, reactions, like so the basic like, which are one count as a reaction, the new reactions, and comments, for example. So let's say 1,000 posts had 10,000 points of engagement. Yeah. How many of those points were a result of a reaction, right? So if you have a substantial portion of reactions taking like a big part of the engagement, obviously people are liking them, they're using them, they're being meaningfully used to engage with posts. So that could be a really meaningful stat for us to know. Another one, which is a bit more relevant for influencers and businesses, would be improvement in quality of engagement over a certain number of posts, let's say over 5 or 10 posts, before and after reactions. And what I mean by that, by quality of engagement, is looking at a few elements. So likes and reactions and comments, so overall engagement per post, looking at conversion rates or click-through rates for different links that the businesses or the influencers are trying to promote, and more positive reactions overall. So you want to see, and I'll explain a bit why I think that would be a good metric. We talked before how reactions can give businesses and influencers better feedback about their posts without having to read all the comments and look at the specifics. You can just have a quick overview. So this would test whether influencers and businesses can actually take that feedback and improve quicker than they could before. So you can look at the range, the rate of improvement of a certain business or a certain influencer and compare it before and for, let's say, you look at the improvement over 5 posts before reactions were implemented, and then the improvement of 5 posts after reactions were implemented, and look at the rate of change in quality of engagement like I defined a second ago. So that could be an interesting metric to look at. Does engagement, or does positive engagement or quality engagement improve quicker when you have reactions available to influencers and businesses to reflect upon after every post?
Got it. So I'm curious to know, you mentioned quality of engagement. Is there any reason you mentioned quality? Like, could it be that you mean rate of improvement in engagement? Is that what you mean, or am I?
Okay, so in this specific one, so we looked before when I mentioned the other matrix, they actually looked at just the overall quantity of engagement. Right. So do we get more engagement? What I want to see here, and keep in mind, the answer could be no, maybe there is no difference. But what I think would be interesting to look at here, whether influencers and businesses are able to improve their posts quicker, that is, get better conversion rates, because they look at the post, let's say they got lots of angry emojis on a certain, or angry reacts on a certain post. They're like, okay, people don't like that. Or they're getting more likes than love hearts, for example.
Got it.
Yeah.
So basically a quicker way of determining whether or not the post was I'm looking for the right term. Would you say the post was, did resonate with the community? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
with the fans?
That's a really good way of explaining it. So not necessarily about the quantity, which is obviously a useful matrix, and we will look into that as well. But this specific one is, how well it resonated with the community, whether the influencers and the businesses are able to learn quicker from the feedback they get from reactions versus the feedback they got just from likes and comments. So whether they're able to improve the post to resonate better with the community quicker than before, the rate of improvement on that
And
matrix.
how would you measure that rate? How would you, um, like what would be the, basically the numerator and the denominator?
Yeah. So there could be, so the way I look at it right now, I see three different measures of quality, which can all be used. And you can give them different weights. So depending on, maybe some more market research potentially, or maybe talking to a specific influencer or business in that test study. I can give you my own idea for the weights, but I'll first again outline the three categories. So one of them would be just the sheer, like I said before, the quantity, the number of likes, reactions, comments per post. So you would look at 5 posts before reactions, and you would look at the rate of change from per post. So let's say you have 5 posts, do the 5 posts, and you have the first post, you're getting 10 overall reactions. Then you're getting 15, 20, 25, 30. You would look at the rate of change between each post in the increase in engagement. And then you would have after reactions. So now you're getting, let's say, so you had 30 here. Now you're getting, let's say, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So your rate of increase in reactions is much quicker than before. Obviously, you have to account for just natural growth, and I'm sure Facebook has the stats for it, so you can, reduce just the natural growth factor from the overall stat, which is it's obviously a bit more of a complicated stat. I just thought it would be very interesting to see the not just numbers but the quality. But yeah, so that would be one metric, for example. So you look at the rate of change, right? The velocity of increase of reactions in each case, and you compare them. So you divide
Well, in
the rate
one
of
case,
change.
you don't have reactions. In the other
Yes.
case, you do.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm trying to think about when you say velocity, you're really referring to
Sorry, the acceleration. The velocity,
what's
the
that?
acceleration. Yeah.
Right, the rate for not only necessarily reactions, basically for any sort of engagement. You want to see if that rate of engagement is increasing.
Yes, that's right.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
that comes from, yeah, it comes from the assumption as well that, at least for me, I know when I see people that react to a post with some emojis, it makes me want to engage with the post more. It makes me feel like people care more about it. So I would engage with it, even if it's just a like for me. I normally don't leave reactions personally. I just leave a like or a comment still, but I know a lot of people who leave reactions. And if I have to reflect, I know I'm more likely to interact with the post. Even though I don't leave a reaction, I am more likely to interact with it if it has lots of reactions. I'll be more intrigued by it.
Got it.
So that's why I want to look at the overall rate of engagement as one metric. Another metric would be the click-through rate or conversion rate on links and website services that the website is trying, or the influencer is trying to promote. So the idea here is it gives you a bit more social proof, or at least we want to see if reactions give more social proof. So we want to see if the click-through rate and the conversion rate is better when using reactions versus no reactions. And I think we can both agree that better conversion rate equates to better quality of engagement. So that's another metric we would look at. So conversion rate per whatever post between comparing the two things. And the last one would be more positive reactions. So obviously it's hard to measure this one before, but this specific one would measure throughout. So whether influencers are able to quickly improve the perception of their posts based on the reactions. So do they get more positive reactions? This one might not be as useful as the other matrix, simply because you can't really do it before reactions because you don't have reactions. But I still think it'll be useful to see how quickly influencers are able to improve on the post, and if they're able to improve the post at all. So that would be.
Yeah, so I have a question on this. So you're suggesting that you're able to measure the improvement in positive reactions. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes. So I think we need to define what is a positive reaction and what is a negative reaction. I think that honestly, looking at it now, that might be a bit redundant, to be honest, because I know I've seen some posts where someone is posting, let's say, they post something they don't support, and people will react angrily, but that is in support of the person, but against the content, which the person is also against. So let's scrap that. Let's say that's actually, yeah, thinking about it now, I think the other two would be a good enough indicator for this, for the quality of engagement for our purposes. So
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, weight-wise, I mean, I think both are really important to determine the overall quality of engagement. If I had to factorize them, I'd say almost always click-through rate and conversion rate seems to be something people really care about, especially in a business sense. So I might give it a little bit more weight than overall engagement, depending obviously on the goals and the purposes. If Facebook decides to add something like this, for example, to the influencer dashboard, maybe you can let, which Facebook already does, let the business decide what's more important, engagement or conversion, and then it will adjust the factor based on their goals, right? So when you do the experiment or when you actually give people access to those stats, or even internally, before you get someone to participate, you can get them to select what they care more about. So you can factorize the different elements for quality, more tailor them towards the specific user. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess just to finish off, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we have some basic metrics such as, overall engagement for the site, looking at overall revenue, looking at overall new users that are being, I guess, brought in due to the new feature. They want to see it, or it suddenly gives them something that they didn't have before. Revenue, again, people engaging more. And
Sorry, can you elaborate on the second one? Number of users that were brought in because they haven't seen the feature before.
So again, I think so. I'm bringing those ones very crammed together because I feel like I want to mention them, but they're not as specific. I can elaborate though. So I think if someone got, they didn't like living, they felt, we've talked before, they felt a bit closed in. They didn't like the range of engagement they could have had. And now they have this extra layer of engagement. They might want to come in and give it another shot, give Facebook another shot. Or maybe if they had an account, but they weren't an active user. I feel like nowadays when reporting, in quarterly meetings or annual reports, active users is a very important metric. So there is a chance that adding this layer of interactivity could improve your active users.
Okay.
Again, those ones are the other ones were a bit more niche and specific to the feature. Those ones are a bit more, any feature you add, you would hope will increase your revenue almost. Almost any feature you add, you hope will increase the engagement in the new users, right? So it's a bit of a cheap, kind of easy ones. So you can mention them. I do want to mention them. It is obviously important. Like if reactions show to improve revenue in users and all that, that's great. But those ones are more of a generic matrix, not something that I would say is super specific to this feature. But with that, if you have any questions, I think that's the answer for me. So I'll use those matrix that I've mentioned just now to evaluate the success of reactions on Facebook. And I got to that based on our previous discussion and building up on all the information I gathered on Facebook and the reaction feature and the users, obviously. Yeah.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. So I have a question for you. I think how would you measure the adoption rate? Like, or do you think that should be something that is taken into consideration?
Yeah. So 100%, I feel like adoption rate is definitely important to measure in this case, mainly because obviously the quicker people adopt this feature, the more effective it is and the more it is used on the platform. So just to clarify your question, did you just want to know if I think it's important? Or do you want me to kind of explain how
I'm curious to know, do you think that your metrics measure adoption? And if they don't, should you? And if you should, what should they be?
Yeah. So I think one of the matrix does measure adoption, and that was the percent of reaction used per certain post. So it actually shows you how out of 10,000 reactions, for example, how many or 10,000 engagements, how many of them were reactions and how many were other things that will be considered engagement. So obviously, the larger the percentage of reactions, the more adoption there is overall in the community. So I'd say that one would be a pretty good indicator for adoption. I do think it's important, hence the metric. Like I said before, to really, you have a cool feature, but no one is using it, or very little amount, like a very small group of people is using it on your website, then it's not really, unless it was a niche, obviously niche feature. In this case, we're looking at something that is intended to be used by the wide community of Facebook. So adoption rate, I think, is really important. That would be a good way to measure it. So percentage reaction. You can also look at speed. So again, compare the percentage of used reactions over time, and then compare that to the adoption of other features. I'm trying to think what other features Facebook added that would be super relevant. I can't think of anything that is super comparable, but you can look at stuff like Marketplace, for example, which is obviously very different to reactions, but you can compare the rate of adoption of Marketplace to the rate of adoptions of the reaction feature. And obviously it'll be very rough comparison, but maybe it'll give you an idea of, give you some benchmark to how quickly people adapt to new features on Facebook. Or other, again, I'm not sure about the full intricacies of Facebook. I don't use it, every single feature on there. But maybe if there are other features that were introduced, Facebook can use them as benchmark and then look at the rate of this percentage of reactions out of overall engagement and look at the rate of change of that over time and benchmark it against other reactions. On a side note, if I was a PM at Facebook, I would expect a fairly quick adoption of the reaction feature. So even if you have a benchmark compared to other features, from what I've seen, the reactions just naturally, intuitively would need to be interacted with more and quicker than anything else Facebook added in the recent kind of recent past. So I would probably look at the benchmark, but expect it to perform on the higher end of the benchmark.
Got it.
Personally, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the answer. I appreciate it. I'm curious to know, how do you think you did?
Yeah, look, I felt like it was definitely interesting question. I feel like I did fairly well. I won't lie. I'm sure I could have answered some things better. Like there's never a perfect answer. But I think I explained what I do think I did well is at least explain my thought process. And I think I was able to break down the question pretty well. I might have been able to come up with some more interesting metrics that I didn't realize on the spot, or maybe a more interesting user breakdown. But I think the thought process was there. But I'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, for sure. I think you did a really good job of, like you said, your structure was great. You started describing what Facebook is all about, what reactions is all about, what are the user groups of it, and what's the value that they deliver. And to your point, once you describe the value, it was a lot easier for you to really think about, like, how do you measure the success in delivering those values. I really like the way you approached it. I think the metrics that you came up with are very meaningful. I'll have some feedback for them in a second. Couple things that I would have done maybe slightly differently. One is, I think you made one assumption, which is this is a new feature that's being launched. Perhaps I would have either stated that as an assumption, or I would have just asked the interviewer if it's okay to make that assumption, just to be clear, to make sure that the interviewer is not wondering why you're assuming that it's just being launched. The other thing that I would have probably done is spend a little bit less time to describe Facebook and the user groups and reactions. I think it's fair to assume that both of you and the interviewer know what they are. And I like how you spend time to think about the values that they deliver, and then went into the actual metrics, but I would have probably spent a little bit less time. I think on the metrics, I really like the metrics that you came up with. The third metric that you described, which was around in basically rate of engagement, whether or not that rate of engagement is increasing or not. It's a very interesting metric. I think you struggle to describe it a little bit because it's actually a hard metric to describe. But once I understood what you're thinking about, I could see the interesting benefit of it. If that increases, that's a very, very interesting value prop for Facebook, and it would be actually a very good value prop for the influencers as well. I think I would, improving in positive reactions. Like I really like the fact that you openly admitted that maybe this metric is not the right metric and you change your opinion. I think that's fine. It actually shows that you're not potentially stubborn with the approach that you're taking. I think that was really good. One metric that I would have thought about more is in terms of whether or not that adoption is distributed or really focused in one particular user group. And what I mean by that is you could be seeing that there is a high percentage of, let's say, engagements coming from reactions, but maybe they're driven by 10% of the users, let's say, because they're highly engaged with reactions and 90% of the other users don't use it all. And that could be an issue. Potentially there would be, if there are ways to improve that, I think that would be great. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this. And was there a particular reason that you decided to not include it, or it was just something that you didn't include?
Yeah, no, I think I'll take the bullet here. No, definitely something in hindsight I should have included. That's actually an interesting metric. Yeah, no, that would have been really, that's a good metric to include. I think for whoever's watching this, include that one in your answer. That's a good one. So basically looking at the distribution of the reaction feature, whether it's been adopted by the super loud group or has it been used by everyone. Maybe even, obviously, Facebook has quite a lot of statistics about who's using the platform. So you can look at, do young people use it? Do old people use it? Do businesses use it? Do, who's using it and how is it being distributed? Because if you have, if it's a small portion that is not the main, I guess, the main current value bringers of kind of users using it, but not the main users Facebook wants users to use the reaction feature, that could potentially be, like you mentioned, an issue and has to be addressed and how the feature is being improved in the future or changed. So yeah, didn't think of that, but that's definitely good to add to the bank. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much again for doing the mock interview. I think it was a great learning experience for everybody. And before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you if you have any tips for people that are thinking about getting the associate PM job at one of the top tech companies in the world, or they're just looking for a PM job at one of the tech companies. They might be already PMs and they're looking for ways to prep, and they'd love to hear your perspective on how to do it.
Yeah, for sure. So look, before I go into tips, I just want to say that, I'm just a student, so I'm just finishing university now. I got into the APM. It's always a combination of luck and skill. There's a bit of mixed up all around. So don't take what I'm saying as I'm sure no one would, but the end all be all. There was a lot of, variables and different companies. I mean, the PM role is very different in very different companies. Google, for example, it's much more technical than Atlassian, for example. And you have the Microsoft, which is more of like the product manager role is a bit different. It's more of like a team lead kind of thing versus, other companies. So I'd say do your research on the company you're getting into. What do PMs do there? Feel free to reach out to people on LinkedIn. Just be like, hey, I want to have a chat. You might not get a response, but if you do, it's awesome. As far as my actual prep, I'd say what I've done and what I would recommend is really starting like real practice. So Bijan's website, PM exercises, product exercises, this awesome resource that I've used quite a bit to look at some example questions. They have really good community. And yeah, it's been really awesome. And using that in conjunction with, and I think one thing that really helps, so using those kind of questions together with actual mock interviews, like the one we did here. So either get friends to help you, if you can have, if you can hit up people who are PMs on LinkedIn that actually that or you want to get in touch with, that can help you. That's awesome. You have some websites like Pramp, for example, or I know Bijan is working on a feature that might allow you to do that as well. So just using some sort of a mock interview tool could be absolutely amazing. Helped me a lot. Obviously, it depends on the person you're talking to, but if you get lucky and you do it enough times, it would really improve your confidence and your ability to think on the spot and come up with the solutions. And yeah, just do your research, prepare a lot, and yeah, overall, it's a pretty fun process. It should be enjoyable overall. Like I enjoyed every second of it. I enjoyed the prep. I enjoyed the interviews. I'm enjoying the mock interview now. So overall, just it should be fun. Don't stress too much.
Yeah, I agree. I tell a lot of people that actually being a PM is a lot of fun, and prepping for a PM interview is also a lot of fun.
Mm.
And what's interesting is once you do well in PM job interviews, you actually you do well in your actual PM jobs as well. The two really go hand in hand. And it's a little bit hard at first because the frameworks and the structures that are expected of you seem a little bit random and seem difficult to follow. But once you learn why you have to follow them, and once you do a bunch of them, it kind of becomes part of your product development process. And you think about, how do I improve a product that I'm being assigned? Well, you have to think about the user group. You have to think about the pain points associated with that user group. And you have to choose which of those pain points you like to prioritize. And then think about the different solutions that you can have to address them. So I agree with you. And I think it's a really good learning experience to become really well prepared for PM job interviews, and it actually makes you well prepared for your PM jobs as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it for everybody. Again, if you're preparing for your PM job interviews, please visit us at Product Management Exercises, where you can practice over 1,000 product manager interview questions. You can practice mock interviews with other product managers or aspiring product managers. And you can also go over a product manager course that helps you prepare for your PM job interview. The website is, again, productmanagementexercises.com. Thank you, and have a good day.